Molly believed her invisibility was her safety, just another waitress ignored by billionaires and tormented by her manager. But her safety shattered the moment she let her guard down in the shadowed hallway of the Omni private club. She thought she was weeping in solitude, unaware that the city's most dangerous man was listening in the dark. 5 minutes later, the doors locked, the music died, and the boss made a decision that would send shockwaves through the underworld. He didn't just fire the manager that night, he fired everyone, except her. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Molly Bennett adjusted the collar of her uniform, staring at her reflection in the darkened window of the L train. At 24, she looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, because it was etched into her bones by debt collectors and hospital bills. Her mother's surgery was scheduled for next Tuesday at Mercy Hospital, and Molly was exactly $4,000 short. That meant tonight at the Velvet Room had to be perfect. The Velvet Room wasn't just a club. It was a fortress of wealth buried in the heart of the Gold Coast. It was where politicians shook hands with men they claimed to arrest on the news. It was a place where a bottle of champagne cost more than Molly's rent for the year, and it was run by the Rossi family, specifically Dominic Rossi. Nobody said his name out loud. The staff just referred to him as the owner, or him. Molly had worked there for 6 months and had never seen him. He was a ghost story, a rumor of a man who watched everything from the VIP balcony, but never descended to the floor. "Move it, Bennett!" The voice snapped Molly out of her thoughts as she pushed through the heavy service doors. Rick Stevens, the floor manager, was standing by the bar checking his watch. Rick was a man who confused cruelty with leadership. He was sweating, his cheap cologne battling with the smell of expensive leather and spilled gin. "You're 2 minutes late," Rick hissed, grabbing Molly's arm as she tried to pass. "The train was delayed, Rick. I'm sorry." "It won't happen again," Molly said, pulling her arm away. She kept her head down. "Keep the job. You need the money." "It won't happen again because next time you're out," Rick sneered. "Tonight is a high-stakes night. We have the Moretti delegation coming in. If you drop so much as a napkin, I will make sure you never work in this city again. Do you understand?" "Yes, Rick. Good. You're on the VIP balcony service. Table 4. Molly froze. Table 4 was the Rossi table, the owner's table. "Rick, I usually work the floor," she stammered. I don't care what you usually do." Rick's voice rose, causing a bartender to look over nervously. "Jessica called in sick. You're the replacement. Don't look at the guests. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, fix your hair. You look like a stray dog." Molly swallowed the lump in her throat, nodded, and hurried to the locker room. Her hands were shaking as she pinned her hair back. She checked her phone one last time, a text from her mum. "Don't worry about the money, honey. I'm feeling better today." Molly felt a tear prick her eye. Her mother was lying. She was getting worse. Molly wiped her eyes aggressively. She couldn't cry. Not here. Crying was a luxury for people who had safety nets. She walked out onto the floor, tray in hand. The club was already filling up. The bass of the music thumped against her chest, a rhythmic reminder of the pressure building in the room. She navigated the sea of designer suits and cocktail dresses, making her way up the spiral staircase to the VIP balcony. The air up here was different. It was colder, quieter. Table 4 was empty, save for a single man sitting in the shadows of the booth. He wasn't looking at the dancers below or the menu. He was looking at a tumbler of whiskey, swirling it gently. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than the building. His dark hair was slicked back, and even in the dim light, Molly could feel the intensity radiating off him. She approached slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Good evening, sir," she whispered, placing a fresh coaster down. "Can I get you anything else?" The man didn't look up. "Leave the bottle." His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder. Molly placed the bottle of Macallan 25 on the table. As she did, her hand trembled slightly, and the glass bottle clicked against the table surface. A tiny sound, barely audible. But the man stopped swirling his drink. He looked up. His eyes were steel grey, cold and calculating. He looked at her hand, then up to her face. For a second, Molly felt like he was reading every secret she had ever kept. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "What is your name?" he asked. "Molly. Molly Bennett, sir." He held her gaze for a second longer than was comfortable, then looked back at his drink. "Go." Molly retreated, her legs feeling like jelly. She hurried back to the service station, her heart racing. That was him. That had to be Dominic Rossi. She thought she had survived the encounter. She was wrong. The night was just beginning. By 1 a.m. the club was at capacity. The energy had shifted from luxurious to chaotic. The Moretti delegation had arrived, loud, boisterous men who treated the waitresses like furniture. Rick was manic, running around the floor, screaming orders into his headset. He was trying to impress the Morettis, trying to show he could run a tight ship. Molly was carrying a heavy tray of martinis toward the main booth when it happened. One of the Moretti associates, a heavy-set man named Paulie, suddenly threw his arm out to gesture at a joke. His hand collided hard with Molly's tray. Crash. Crystal shattered. Expensive vodka splashed across Paulie's Italian loafers. The room went silent. "You stupid bitch!" Paulie roared, jumping up. "Look what you did! These shoes are $2,000. Molly dropped to her knees instantly, grabbing napkins. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't see your arm. I'm so sorry." "You didn't see?" Paulie kicked the broken glass toward her. A shard sliced her finger, but she didn't flinch. She was too terrified. "Are you blind or just stupid? Get up!" Rick was there in an instant. He didn't help Molly. He grabbed her by the shoulder and hauled her up, digging his fingers into her arm. "Mr. Moretti, Paulie, I am so sorry." Rick groveled, his face pale. "This girl is incompetent. She's new. I'll handle this immediately." "You better," Paulie spat. "Get her out of my face." Rick dragged Molly toward the service hallway, the heavy velvet curtains closing behind them, muffling the music. The hallway was long, lined with expensive wallpaper and dim sconces. It was the only place in the club that felt empty. Rick threw her against the wall. "You are fired," Rick hissed, his face inches from hers. Spittle landed on her cheek. "Get your things and get out. You're done." "Rick, please," Molly begged, tears finally spilling over. "It wasn't my fault. He hit the tray. Please, I need this job. My mom is sick. I have the surgery next week. Please just dock my pay. Don't fire me." "I don't care about your dying mother," Rick shouted. The cruelty in his voice was absolute. "You embarrassed me in front of the Morettis. You're trash, Molly. Just trash. You think anyone cares about your sob story? You're nothing. Now get out before I have security throw you out." Rick turned and stormed back through the curtains to the club, leaving Molly alone in the semi-darkness. The silence that followed was suffocating. Molly slid down the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. The adrenaline crashed, replaced by a wave of pure despair. She buried her face in her hands. The image of her mother's hospital bed flashed in her mind. I failed. I failed her. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. She just cried. Soft, broken sobs that echoed slightly in the empty corridor. It was the sound of someone who had been holding the weight of the world for too long and finally collapsed. "Why?" she whispered to the empty air. "Why is it always like this?" She thought she was alone. But further down the hallway, near the private elevator that led to the penthouse, a shadow moved. Dominic Rossi had left his table. He hated the noise of the Morettis. He had come to the back for silence. Instead, he found this. He stood in the darkness, unmoving. He watched the girl, the one with the trembling hands from earlier, collapsed against the wall. He heard the managers shouting. He heard the insults. Trash. Nothing. And now he heard her crying. Dominic was not a kind man. He was a man who had killed to protect his family's empire. He had ordered hits, negotiated wars, and ruined lives. Tears usually annoyed him. They were a sign of weakness, but there was something about the sound of her crying that irritated him. It wasn't the sound of weakness, it was the sound of injustice. And if there was one thing Dominic Rossi hated more than weakness, it was disrespect in his house. Rick Stevens had made a mistake. He had forgotten who really owned the Velvet Room. Dominic adjusted his cufflinks. He didn't walk toward Molly. Instead, he walked toward the service door Rick had just exited. He pushed the button on his earpiece. "Security," he said calmly. "Yes, boss?" The head of security, a giant named Miller, answered instantly. "Lock the front doors, no one leaves, and cut the music." "Sir, you heard me. Cut the music. Turn on the house lights. I want everyone on the floor in 2 minutes." "Understood." Dominic looked back at Molly one last time. She was still crying, unaware that the atmosphere in the building was shifting, unaware that the devil was about to step into the light for her. Inside the main club, the party was at its peak. Paulie Moretti was laughing, recounting how he had scared the waitress, holding a fresh drink. Rick was standing nearby, laughing with him, trying to curry favor. "Yeah, she was shaking like a leaf," Rick chuckled. "Don't worry, Paulie, I threw the trash out." Suddenly the thumping bass cut out. The silence hit the room like a physical blow. People stopped dancing, confused. A few shouts of "Hey!" rang out. Then the warm, dim mood lighting vanished, replaced by the harsh, bright white house lights. The club looked different in the light. The glamour faded, revealing the stains on the carpet and the tired faces of the guests. "What the hell is going on?" Paulie shouted. "Rick, fix the lights!" Rick looked panicked. He tapped his headset. "Lighting booth? DJ? What are you doing?" No answer. Then, the heavy doors to the service hallway flew open. They didn't just open. They banged against the walls. Dominic Rossi walked in. He was flanked by 4 security guards, including Miller. But nobody was looking at the guards. They were looking at Dominic. He walked with a predator's grace, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight to the center of the dance floor. A hush fell over the room. Even the Morettis, usually loud and arrogant, went quiet. They knew who Dominic was. They knew you didn't cross him. Rick Stevens saw him and went pale as a sheet. He rushed forward, his hands shaking. "Mr. Rossi, sir, I don't know what happened. Technical difficulties. I'll get it fixed, right?" Dominic didn't stop walking until he was face to face with Rick. He towered over the manager. "Silence," Dominic said. He didn't shout, but his voice carried to the back of the room. Rick clamped his mouth shut. Dominic slowly turned his head, scanning the room. His eyes landed on the staff lined up by the bar, bartenders, waitresses, busboys. They were all terrified. Then he looked at the Moretti table. "Who spilled the drink?" Dominic asked. Paulie Moretti stood up, puffing out his chest. "It was your clumsy waitress, Dom. She spilled vodka on my shoes. Rick here handled it, fired her." Dominic looked at Paulie. "Is that so?" "Yeah, she was a mess. Disrespectful." Dominic turned back to Rick. "You fired her?" "Yes, sir," Rick said quickly, sensing an opportunity to look competent. "She was crying, making a scene. I told her to get out. We don't need that kind of unprofessionalism here, right, boss?" Dominic stared at Rick for a long, agonizing moment. "Miller," Dominic said softly. "Yes, boss." "Bring her in." A gasp went through the staff. Miller disappeared into the hallway and returned a moment later. He was gently guiding Molly. Molly looked like a wreck. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair messy. She looked around, blinded by the bright lights, terrified by the silence. When she saw Dominic standing in the center of the room, she stopped breathing. The man from the balcony. "Come here, Molly," Dominic said. Molly walked forward, her legs shaking. She stopped a few feet away from him, keeping her head down. She expected him to yell at her, to humiliate her further. Dominic reached out. The whole room held its breath. He placed a hand under her chin and lifted her face so she had to look at him. "Did you drop the tray?" he asked. Molly's voice cracked. "It fell. I'm sorry." "Did you drop it?" he repeated, harder. "No," she whispered. "He hit my arm." Dominic let go of her chin. He turned to Paulie. "You came into my house," Dominic said, walking towards the Moretti table. "You drank my liquor, and then you assaulted my staff." "It was an accident," Paulie stammered, stepping back. "And then?" Dominic turned to Rick. "You, my manager. The man I pay to protect this establishment." "Sir, I was protecting the reputation of the club," Rick pleaded. "You called her trash," Dominic said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I heard you, in the hallway. You told her nobody cared about her sick mother. You told her she was nothing." Rick's knees gave out. He actually fell to the floor. "Mr. Rossi, please!" "Do you know what makes a leader, Rick?" Dominic asked, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "A leader protects his people. You didn't protect her. You sacrificed her to a pig in a suit." Dominic looked at the rest of the staff, the bartenders who had watched Rick scream at Molly for months and said nothing, the other waitresses who had turned a blind eye to the bullying to save their own skins. "I stood on the balcony for 6 months," Dominic addressed the room. I watched you," he pointed to the head bartender, "steal tips from the jar. I watched you," he pointed to the hostess, "take bribes for tables, and I watched all of you let this man," he gestured to Rick, "terrorize this girl." He turned back to Molly. She was trembling, tears streaming down her face again, but she wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at him. "Miller," Dominic said. "Sir, fire them." The room erupted in murmurs. "What?" Rick squeaked. "Fire them," Dominic repeated, his voice like iron. "Everyone. The bartenders, the security at the door who let the Morettis in without a check, the waitstaff who stood by, and especially him." He pointed at Rick. "Get him out of my sight before I kill him." Miller nodded. "And the girl, boss?" Dominic looked at Molly. The room was empty of noise again. "She stays," Dominic said. "From now on, she answers only to me." He looked at Paulie Moretti. "And as for you, get out. If you ever step foot in Chicago again, you won't leave." Paulie didn't argue. He ran. As security began to drag a screaming Rick Stevens out of the club, and the rest of the staff stood in shocked silence, Dominic took off his suit jacket. He walked over to Molly and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of cedar and whiskey. "Wipe your face, Molly," Dominic said softly, so only she could hear. "Nobody cries in my house unless I say so, and tonight you're done crying." The next morning felt less like a new beginning and more like the aftermath of a car crash. Molly woke up in her small, drafty apartment, staring at the black suit jacket hanging on her doorframe. It wasn't a dream. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Miss Bennett," a deep voice said. It wasn't him. It was Miller, the head of security. "A car is waiting downstairs. You have a meeting with Mr. Rossi at 10 a.m. sharp. Do not be late." Molly scrambled. She dressed in the most professional clothes she owned, a grey pencil skirt and a white blouse that she ironed 3 times. When she walked downstairs, a matte black SUV was idling at the curb, looking out of place in her crumbling neighborhood. Neighbors peered through their blinds as Miller opened the door for her. The drive to the Rossi headquarters, not the club, but the corporate offices in a steel skyscraper downtown, was silent. Molly's mind raced. Why didn't he fire me? What does he want? When she arrived, she was ushered into a top-floor office that was larger than her entire apartment building. The walls were glass, overlooking the Chicago skyline. Dominic Rossi sat behind a massive desk made of dark mahogany, reading a file. He didn't look up immediately. "Sit," he said. Molly sat. She folded her hands to stop them from shaking. Dominic closed the file. "I looked into your background, Molly. You dropped out of college 2 years ago. Marketing major, 3.8 GPA. You quit to take care of your mother, Martha Bennett, diagnosed with advanced cardiac arrhythmia. Molly felt a chill. How do you know that? I know everything about the people I allow into my circle, Dominic said, leaning back. You have $43,000 in debt. Your rent is 2 months behind, and the surgery scheduled for Tuesday requires a $4,000 copay you don't have. Molly stood up, her face burning. If you brought me here to humiliate me, Mr. Rossi, you can save your breath. I know I'm poor. I don't need a billionaire to remind me. Dominic's eyes flashed, a hint of amusement or respect. Sit down, he ordered, softer this time. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. Molly hesitated, then looked at it. It was a receipt from Mercy Hospital, paid in full. Not just the copay, the entire surgery, the recovery stay, the medication. Everything. Molly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I can't accept this. This is nearly $100,000. I can't pay you back. I didn't ask for money, Dominic said, standing up and walking around the desk. He moved with that same predator's grace, closing the distance until he was leaning against the edge of the desk, right in front of her. I fired my entire staff last night, Molly. I fired my manager. I have a club that generates $2 million a month, and nobody to run it who I can trust. I don't need a waitress. I have plenty of people who can carry trays. He locked eyes with her. I need someone who understands what it feels like to be at the bottom, so she never takes the top for granted. I need a manager who sees everything. You saw the bartender stealing. You saw the hostess taking bribes. You saw it all, and you kept your mouth shut because you had to survive. Now you don't have to survive. You have to rule. You want me to manage the Velvet Room? Molly whispered. I'm just a waitress. No, Dominic corrected her. You are the woman who stood up to Paulie Moretti's insults without breaking until you were alone. You have dignity. Rick Stevens had none. I am offering you the position of general manager. Your salary will be triple what Rick made, but there is a condition. Molly's heart pounded. What condition? Loyalty, Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave. Absolute, blind, loyalty. You answer to me. You tell me everything. If a cop comes in asking for a drink, I want to know. If a supplier shorts us a bottle, I want to know. You are my eyes now, Molly. Can you do that? Molly looked at the receipt, her mother's life. Then she looked at Dominic. He wasn't just offering a job, he was offering protection. He was offering a way out of the darkness. Yes, she said. Good, Dominic said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. Brand new, encrypted. This is your new number. Rick Stevens is outside in the lobby. He came to beg for his job back. Molly stiffened. Go out there, Dominic said, opening the door for her. Fire him again. Enjoy it. Molly walked out of the office. In the waiting area, Rick Stevens looked pathetic. He was unshaven, holding a box of personal items, pleading with the receptionist. When he saw Molly, he froze. Molly? Rick blinked. What are you doing here? Did he fire you too? Molly straightened her spine. She thought of the insults. Trash. Nothing. She looked at Rick, and for the first time in her life she didn't feel small. Mr. Rossi is busy, Rick, Molly said, her voice steady. And security will escort you out. If you come back to the building or the club, Mr. Rossi says he will take it as a personal threat, and you know what he does with threats. Rick's jaw dropped. He looked from Molly to the closed office door, realizing the power shift. He didn't say a word. He just turned and ran. Molly let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She turned back to the office door. Dominic was watching her through the glass. He nodded, just once. The cage was gilded, yes. But for the first time, Molly held the key. 3 weeks later, the Velvet Room was unrecognizable. Under Molly's management, the theft stopped. The service was impeccable. She hired a new staff, people like her, people who needed a break, not arrogant kids with connections. She treated them with respect, and in return, they worked harder than Rick's crew ever had. Dominic came in every night. He sat at table 4. He rarely drank anymore. He just watched her. The tension between them was becoming a physical force. Every time Molly brought him his nightly report, his hand would brush hers, or he would hold her gaze a second too long. It wasn't spoken, but the air crackled with it. The staff whispered that the boss was in love. Molly told herself it was just business, but she knew she was lying. It was a Tuesday night, rainy and quiet. Molly was in the back office, counting the cash drop. "You're working too late," a voice said from the doorway. Molly jumped. Dominic was leaning against the doorframe, his tie undone, looking dangerously handsome. "I just want the books to be perfect, Dominic," she said. She had started calling him by his first name in private. He walked over, took the pen from her hand, and placed it on the desk. "The books are perfect. You're exhausted. I'm driving you home." "I can take a cab," she protested. "I didn't ask." The drive was quiet but comfortable. The fear she used to feel around him had been replaced by a strange sense of safety. He walked her to the door of her apartment building. She still hadn't moved, despite the raise. She wanted to save money first. "Thank you," she said, standing on the stoop. The rain was misting around them. Dominic looked down at her. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His skin was rough, warm. Molly's breath hitched. He leaned in, his lips inches from hers. Ideally, this was the moment he would kiss her. "Be careful, Molly," he whispered instead. "Safety is an illusion in my world. Don't let your guard down." He pulled away and walked back to his car. Molly watched him go, her heart aching with a mixture of desire and confusion. She went inside, her mind in a fog. She didn't notice the shadow in the stairwell until it was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth. A rag smelling of chemicals was pressed against her nose. "You think you're special?" a voice hissed in her ear. It was Rick. "You think you can take my life and just walk away?" Molly struggled, kicking out, but another set of hands grabbed her legs. "Grab her," a second voice said. Rougher. "Paulie Moretti. My uncle wants a word with the girl who embarrassed the family." The world spun. Grey. Then black. When Molly woke up, the smell of expensive perfume and stale beer was gone, replaced by the scent of rust and salt water. She was tied to a chair in the middle of a damp warehouse. A single bulb swung overhead. Rick was pacing back and forth, looking manic. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Paulie Moretti was sitting on a crate, cleaning his fingernails with a knife. "She's awake," Rick said, his voice trembling. "Paulie, we gotta hurry. If Rossi finds out—" "Shut up," Paulie snapped. "Rossi is done. We sent the photo, didn't we? He's not coming for her. He's going to walk into the trap." Molly's head throbbed. "What do you want?" she rasped. "Compensation," Paulie smiled, revealing yellow teeth. "See, your boyfriend Rossi banned us from Chicago. Bad for business. We figure he likes you. He likes you a lot. So, we trade. You for the territory." "He won't come," Molly said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I'm just an employee." "Is that right?" Paulie laughed. "Rick, show her the phone." Rick shoved a phone in her face. It was a live feed of the warehouse entrance. "He's already here," Rick whispered. "Alone. Just like we told him." Molly's heart stopped. Dominic had come. Alone. Into a trap set by the Moretti crime family. "He's going to die because of you," Rick sneered. Molly looked at the screen. A single black car had pulled up. Dominic got out. He wasn't wearing a coat. He was walking towards the warehouse doors with his hands in his pockets. He looked calm, bored even. "No," Molly screamed against the gag they shoved back in her mouth. "Run!" The warehouse smelled of brine, rusted iron, and the sour sweat of fear. Molly's wrists burned. The zip ties bit into her skin with every pulse of her racing heart, cutting off circulation until her fingers felt like numb, foreign objects. She was tied to a heavy steel chair in the center of a vast, empty floor, illuminated by a single, buzzing halogen light that swung gently in the draft, casting long, nauseating shadows that danced on the concrete. Rick Stevens was pacing back and forth in the gloom, his footsteps echoing like frantic heartbeats. He looked like a man unraveling. His expensive suit was rumpled, his tie loose, his eyes darting to the heavy steel doors every few seconds. "He's late," Rick muttered, chewing on a fingernail until it bled. "He's not coming. We sent the picture an hour ago. Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe we overestimated her value." "Shut up, Rick," Paulie Moretti growled. Paulie was the opposite of Rick. He sat on a wooden crate, perfectly at ease, cleaning a serrated combat knife with a silk handkerchief. He was surrounded by 10 of his family's enforcers, thick-necked men hiding in the shadows of the shelving units, gripping baseball bats, tire irons, and silenced pistols. They were the trap. Molly was the bait. "Rossi is a man of pride," Paulie said, checking the edge of the blade against his thumb. A thin line of red appeared. "He fired his whole staff for her. He embarrassed my family for her. He'll come. And when he walks through those doors alone, thinking he's a hero, we're going to turn him into a cautionary tale." Molly tried to speak, but the rag shoved in her mouth tasted of motor oil and suppressed her voice to a muffled whimper. Her head throbbed from where they had hit her, but her fear wasn't for herself. It was for Dominic. She had seen the guns. She knew this wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. "Movement," one of the enforcers hissed from the catwalk above. "Black sedan, approaching slowly." Rick rushed to a table where a laptop was set up, displaying a grainy feed from the external security cameras. Molly craned her neck, her vision blurring with tears. On the screen, a sleek black car rolled to a stop on the cracked pavement outside. The engine cut. The headlights died. For a long, agonizing minute, nothing happened. The silence in the warehouse was heavy, suffocating. Then the car door opened. Dominic Rossi stepped out. He wasn't wearing tactical gear. He wasn't surrounded by bodyguards. He was wearing a charcoal suit, crisp and immaculate, with his hands casually in his pockets. He looked at the warehouse doors not with fear, but with an expression of profound boredom. He adjusted his collar, looked up at the security camera, staring directly into the lens as if he could see Rick's soul through the monitor, and then walked towards the entrance. "He's alone," Rick breathed, a hysterical giggle escaping his throat. He actually came alone. "The idiot." "Get ready," Paulie commanded, standing up and signaling his men to fade deeper into the shadows. He walked over to Molly, grabbing a fistful of her hair and jerking her head back. "Showtime, sweetheart. Try to look pathetic. It motivates him." The heavy rolling metal door groaned as it was hauled open by Dominic from the outside. The sound was deafening in the quiet space. Dominic stepped into the halo of the halogen light. He stopped 20 feet away from them. He didn't look at the shadows where the gunmen were hiding. He didn't look at Rick, who was trembling by the laptop. His grey eyes locked instantly onto Molly. He saw the bruise blooming on her cheekbone. He saw the blood crusted on her lip. He saw the terror in her eyes. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to freeze. It was a drop in pressure so sudden it made Molly's ears pop. "Let her go," Dominic said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room, cutting through the hum of the light. Paulie laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. He pressed the cold steel of the knife against the soft skin of Molly's throat. "You're in no position to give orders, Rossi. You're on my turf now. You're trespassing." "This isn't your turf," Dominic said, taking a slow step forward. The sound of his dress shoe on the concrete was crisp. "You're standing in a grave. You just haven't realized it yet." "Brave words for a dead man," Rick shouted, stepping out from behind the table, emboldened by the hidden gunmen. "You treated me like garbage, Dominic. You threw me out like I was nothing. Now look at you, alone, helpless." Dominic finally looked at Rick. The look was one of mild pity. "Rick, I didn't fire you because you were garbage. I fired you because you were weak. And look at you now, hiding behind another man's skirt. Kill him! Rick shrieked, his face turning purple. Paulie, kill him now! Paulie smirked. Boys, he whistled, come out and play. 10 men stepped out of the shadows, surrounding Dominic in a tight circle. Weapons raised. The metallic click of safety catches being disengaged echoed through the room. Molly screamed against her gag, thrashing in her chair. Run! Do something! Dominic didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his hands. He just looked at his watch. You Morettis, Dominic sighed, shaking his head. You always forget to check the perimeter. What? Paulie frowned. Dominic raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. Crack! The sound wasn't thunder. It was the skylights exploding. Glass rained down like diamonds. Before the shards even hit the floor, black ropes uncoiled from the darkness of the rafters. Men in full tactical gear, Miller's elite security team, rappelled down with the speed of spiders. At the exact same second, the entire west wall of the warehouse buckled. A reinforced semi-truck, painted matte black, smashed through the corrugated metal and brick like it was wet cardboard. The impact shook the floor, knocking Rick off his feet. The room erupted into chaos. Dominic didn't move. He stood in the eye of the hurricane while hell broke loose around him. Miller's team hit the ground, firing rubber bullets and stun rounds, non-lethal, but agonizing. The Moretti enforcers, caught completely off guard, scrambled. Gunfire popped, shouts echoed, and the sound of batons hitting flesh filled the air. The truck doors flew open, and more of Dominic's men poured out, overwhelming the ambushers in seconds. It wasn't a fight. It was a cleansing. Paulie Moretti, realizing his trap had been reversed, panicked. His arrogance evaporated, replaced by the feral desperation of a cornered rat. He grabbed Molly's chair, dragging it backward, shielding himself with her body. "Back off!" Paulie screamed, his voice cracking. He pressed the knife harder against Molly's neck. A thin ribbon of bright red blood trickled down her skin, staining the white collar of her blouse. "Stop them, Rossi! Stop them, or I slice her throat wide open!" Dominic raised a hand. Instantly his men froze. The noise stopped. The violence paused. The only sound was Paulie's ragged breathing and the soft dripping of rain through the shattered skylights. Dominic walked forward. He moved through the carnage of groaning men on the floor, his eyes fixed on the knife at Molly's throat. "You drew blood," Dominic said. His voice was terrifyingly conversational. "That was a mistake." "Stay back!" Paulie yelled, his hand trembling. "I swear to God, I'll do it! I'll kill her!" "I believe you," Dominic said. He stopped 10 feet away. "You're a coward, Paulie, and cowards are dangerous because they are unpredictable. So I'm going to give you a choice. I don't want a choice. I want a car. I want safe passage." "No," Dominic said. "Your choice is this. You let her go, and I let the police handle you. You'll go to prison. You'll live." Dominic took another step. "Or you hurt her, and I will peel the skin from your bones while you are still conscious." Paulie stared at Dominic. He looked into the grey eyes of the Mafia boss and saw the abyss. He knew Dominic wasn't lying. His grip on the knife wavered. He glanced at the exit, calculating his odds. Molly felt the pressure of the blade lessen just a fraction. She saw Dominic's eyes flick to her feet, then back to Paulie's face. A microscopic signal. "Don't be a victim," Dominic had told her. "You are the manager, now. You are in control." Adrenaline flooded Molly's system, overriding the pain in her wrists. She didn't wait for him to save her. She lifted her feet and stomped her heels down with all her remaining strength onto Paulie's instep. Paulie howled, the sudden pain breaking his concentration. His hand flew away from her neck instinctively. Molly threw her head back, smashing her skull into Paulie's nose with a sickening crunch. He stumbled backward, blinded by pain, dropping the knife. "You bitch!" Paulie gargled, blood pouring from his face. He raised his hand to strike her, but he never got the chance. A blur of charcoal and vengeance collided with him. Dominic didn't use a gun. He didn't use a knife. He tackled Paulie to the concrete with the force of a freight train. Dominic mounted him, his face a mask of cold, concentrated rage. Thud. Dominic's fist connected with Paulie's jaw. Thud. Another strike. Thud. Paulie stopped fighting. He went limp. But Dominic didn't stop. He wasn't just hitting a man. He was destroying a threat. He was venting the terror he had felt when he saw Molly's empty apartment. "Dominic!" The voice cut through the red haze. It was Molly. Dominic's fist hovered in the air, knuckles split and bloody. He was breathing heavily, his chest heaving. He looked down at the unconscious, ruined face of Paulie Moretti. Then he looked up. Miller had cut Molly loose. She was standing there, unsteady on her feet, rubbing her wrists. She wasn't looking at him with fear. She was looking at him with concern. Dominic stood up. He adjusted his suit jacket, which was miraculously uncreased, and wiped the blood from his hand with a handkerchief he pulled from his pocket. He walked over to Molly. She didn't wait. She collapsed into him, burying her face in his chest, sobbing. The relief was a physical weight, crushing them both. "I've got you," Dominic whispered into her hair, his arms wrapping around her like iron bands. He held her so tight it almost hurt. "I've got you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let them take you." "You came," she cried, her voice muffled by his shirt. "You came alone." "I would have walked into hell alone for you," he murmured. He pulled back, his eyes scanning her face, checking the cut on her neck. He touched the blood gently with his thumb, his jaw tightening again. "Miller," Dominic said, his voice dropping back to that deadly calm. "Yes, boss?" Miller stepped forward, stepping over the moaning form of Rick Stevens, who was curled in a fetal ball on the floor. "Get the car," Dominic said. He scooped Molly up into his arms, carrying her bridal style. She felt light, fragile. He vowed silently that she would never feel fear like this again. "What about the warehouse, sir?" "And the trash," Miller gestured to the pile of Moretti men. Dominic stopped at the doorway. The rain was falling harder now, washing the grime of the city away. "Leave the men for the cops," Dominic said. "But the warehouse?" He looked back at the cold, damp hell where they had hurt her. "Burn it," Dominic commanded. "Burn it to the ground. I don't want a trace of this place left standing." "Understood." Dominic carried Molly out into the night rain. She rested her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes as the cool water hit her face. Behind them, a dull roar began to build as Miller lit the accelerant. An orange glow began to dance in the shattered windows, growing brighter and hotter, casting long, flickering shadows against the wet pavement. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. The fire was cleaning the slate. The past was ash. And as Dominic placed her gently into the back of his car, Molly knew that her life as a victim had burned up in that building too. The penthouse was quiet. It wasn't the silence of an empty hallway or a fearful club. It was the silence of peace. Molly woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of Lake Michigan, so clear it looked like a painting. She sat up, wincing slightly. The cut on her neck was bandaged neatly. Her wrists were sore but clean. The door opened and Dominic walked in. He was holding a tray with coffee and toast. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing grey sweatpants and a white t-shirt. It was the most normal she had ever seen him look, yet he still carried that undeniable aura of command. "You're awake," he said softly, setting the tray down on the nightstand. "How long was I out?" Molly asked, her voice raspy. 14 hours. You needed the rest." He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to crowd her. Miller called. The police ruled the warehouse fire an electrical accident due to faulty wiring. The bodies inside were too badly burned to identify immediately, but the case is considered closed. Molly looked down at her hands. "Rick and Paulie?" "Gone," Dominic said simply. "They can never hurt you again. The Moretti family sent a representative this morning. They apologized for Paulie's rogue actions and have ceded their territory in the south side as a peace offering. They know better than to start a war over a mistake. Molly took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. Just the way she liked it. So it's over? The danger is over, Dominic said. He reached out and took her hand. But this... us. I hope this isn't over. Molly looked at him. The man who had burned a building down for her. The man who had fired an entire staff because they made her cry. I don't have anywhere to go, Dominic, she teased gently. You made me move out. Good, he smiled. It was a real smile reaching his eyes. Because I don't want you to go anywhere. 3 months later. The reopening of the Velvet Room was the social event of the decade. The club had been closed for renovations since the incident, as the staff called it. Rumours had swirled for weeks. Some said Dominic Rossi had retired, others said he was dead. But when the doors opened on a crisp Saturday night, the city's elite flooded in. They found the club transformed. The dark, sleazy corners were gone, replaced by open, golden lighting and white marble. It was elegant. It was sharp. It was perfect. At 10 p.m., the music lowered slightly. Dominic Rossi descended the spiral staircase. He looked as formidable as ever in a midnight blue tuxedo. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was Molly Bennett. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a floor-length gown of emerald silk that hugged every curve. Her hair was swept up, revealing the faint, thin white scar on her neck, a battle scar she refused to hide. She walked with her head high, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. The crowd parted for them. They walked to table 4 on the VIP balcony, but instead of sitting in the shadows, Molly walked to the railing and looked down at the floor. Miller, standing by the bar, gave her a subtle nod. The new staff, hand-picked and vetted by Molly herself, paused and looked up. They didn't look at her with fear. They looked at her with respect. She was fair, she was generous, and she was fiercely protective of her people. They're looking at you, Dominic murmured, standing behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back. They're looking at us, Molly corrected him. No, Dominic said. He turned her around to face him. The noise of the club seemed to fade away. I built the walls, Molly. But you brought the light. I was just a boss before you. A ghost in a suit. You made me a man. He reached into his pocket. The entire VIP section seemed to hold its breath. Dominic Rossi, the untouchable king of Chicago, dropped to one knee. Molly Bennett, he said, his voice steady and loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I don't want to run this empire alone anymore. I don't want to wake up in an empty house. You saved me from the silence. He opened a small velvet box. Inside sat a diamond that looked like it was carved from a star, sharp, brilliant, and unbreakable. Will you marry me? Molly looked at the ring, then at the man. She thought of the girl crying in the hallway, thinking her life was over. She thought of the rain, the fear, and the fire, and she realized that every tear had led her here, to this man who loved her demons as much as her angels. Yes, she whispered, then louder, for the whole room to hear. Yes. Dominic stood up and kissed her. It was a kiss that sealed a pact. The room erupted in applause, politicians, models, and mobsters alike clapping for the union of the wolf and the queen. As they pulled apart, Dominic looked over her shoulder at the club below. He saw a rude customer snap his fingers at a waitress near the bar. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Molly saw it too. She placed a hand on Dominic's chest. I've got it, she said with a smile. She signaled to Miller. Miller looked up, saw Molly's subtle gesture, and immediately moved towards the rude customer to escort him out. Dominic laughed, a deep, rich sound. He pulled Molly close, looking out over their kingdom. My wife, he said, tasting the word, the most dangerous woman in Chicago. Molly rested her head on his shoulder. Only when I have to be, Dominic. Only when I have to be. The music swelled, the champagne flowed, and in the heart of the city, the girl who once cried in the hallway now ruled the world. And she never let anyone cry alone again. And that is the story of Molly and Dominic. It's a reminder that sometimes rock bottom is just the solid foundation you need to build an empire. Molly went from being invisible and bullied to becoming the queen of the city, not just because she was lucky, but because she stayed strong when it mattered most, and she found a partner who valued that strength. What would you have done if you were in Molly's shoes? Would you have forgiven the people who hurt you, or would you have let Dominic burn it all down? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a brand new twisted drama coming for you next week that you won't believe. Thanks for watching.